Welcome to Backbone Unlimited. My name is Matt Hartsky. In this episode, we're diving into a challenge that breaks a lot of hunters. The days when the mountains go dead quiet. I'm there right now. It's beginning of September, September 10th. We've had 10 days of pretty much dead silence. One morning, you can be chasing echoing bugles across the canyon, and the next, you're standing in still timber, wondering if every elk vanished overnight. That silence is where hunts unravel. Confidence drains, doubt creeps in, and guys start hiking aimlessly, burning daylight, or even heading home early. But here's the truth. Silence doesn't mean there aren't elk. It just means the game has changed. In this episode, I'm going to show you how to reset your mind and hunt more effectively when bugles disappear. We'll cover how to diagnose why it went quiet, whether it's pressure, weather, or timing, how to trust wind and thermals when sound won't guide you, how to find fresh sign and intercept travel patterns, and how to use subtle calling and ambush setups to create chances. You'll also learn how to protect your confidence with a simple daily rhythm that keeps you persistent and sharp. By the end, you'll be ready to stay lethal in the elk woods, even when there's not a single bull making a sound. Before we chase tactics, let's start with your head. Quiet days punish sloppy thinking more than sloppy calling. So first, we reset the frame you're hunting through. Silence is not evidence that elk are gone. It's only evidence that they are not advertising. When you accept that, you stop waiting for sound to make decisions and start using structure, wind, and fresh sign to guide you. The reset is pretty simple. You are no longer hunting noise, you are hunting patterns. Begin by defining success differently. On calling days, feedback is instant. On silent days, you measure progress by the quality of your choices. Did you enter with the wind right? Did you move through travel structure instead of random timber? Did you confirm fresh sign before committing deeper? If the answer is yes, you're winning, even if nothing bugles. At first light, thermals are dropping, right? Overnight, right? And this is confusing to a lot of folks. As soon as that shade starts to hit the mountain the night before, temperatures start to cool on the hillside, temperatures start to drop. As soon as it's dark, it's constant downhill thermals, and they don't start to rise again until the sun warms the ground. So we have to approach from below or keep our scent low in the drainages away from suspected bedding areas and those travel corridors from feed to bed. Before you move, give yourself 5 quiet minutes. Look at the slope like a flow chart of elk movement. Identify where cold air pooled overnight, where north-facing cover offers bedding security, where edges burn to timber, old cuts to dark timber create easy travel for them, and where benches or finger ridges allow cows to stage and hang out. If you can point to even 2 of those, you have a plan without a single sound. Now, gather low impact information. Ease to the downwind mouth of a transition area where feeder fingers hit a main slope, and post up. Listen for the faint stuff most hunters ignore. A rock tick, a soft hoof on deadfall, the breathy mew that barely carries. Glass shadow lines, not just openings. Shapes that don't match vertical trunks or what you're after, right? Rounded backs, horizontal lines, a head turning against the grain of the timber. Stay put for long enough to let the woods reveal themselves, then make a controlled micro move. 40 to 50 yards, wind check. Terrain keeps you hidden, right? Read the ground as if it were a conversation. Fresh tracks have a crisp edge in firm soil and hold moisture in shaded dirt. Warm droppings are hours old, right? Not days old. That's what you're looking for. Clipped grass with wet endpoints to point to very recent feeding. A rub with sap, still tacky or hair on it, tells you bulls are nearby. Stack 3 pieces of fresh sign within a small radius and you are inside the bubble, even if it's dead quiet. Treat your call like a scalpel. On silent days, aggressive sequences and bugles can push elk tighter or move them off. Use a single contact note or a short, soft mew only after you have proven your position is right. One note can pause feet or swivel ears without forcing a decision from the whole herd. If nothing answers, you haven't lost anything. If a cow gives you a faint reply or a satellite bull materializes, you just turn silence into an opportunity. Give yourself checkpoint goals before noon. Choose 3, right? Reach a specific bench undetected. Confirm the same morning sign on a contour line. Observe a bedding edge from a safe angle before thermals flip. Checking those boxes provides real wins that build confidence. This keeps you from rushing ridges or abandoning good country just because you're not hearing the music we all love. Use terrain to protect your mind. When sound is absent, distance can feel empty. Terrain gives you structure. Move from feature to feature with intent. Toe a finger ridge, wrap a side hill below the wind line, pause at the uphill edge of a bench. Each stop is a break point to reassess the wind, sign, and noise. This cadence slows you down just enough to notice what a lot of hunters walk right past. Picture a common silent morning scenario on western public land. You enter low in the gray light, thermals are sliding downhill still. You post at the mouth of a transition and you listen. Maybe you glass through it. After a measured pause, you bump forward maybe 50 yards, right? Still below the wind, and you find a damp track on a shaded dirt patch, a fresh rub or clipped grasses. You tag your first checkpoint. You confirmed you just found fresh sign. You shift along the contour line, terrain masking your move, right? And you settle where you can see the edge of north-facing timber. A single, soft contact mew, nothing loud. 5 minutes later, you catch a faint stick pop and a tan shape sliding through the shade. No bugles, but the feedback you need for an opportunity. The reset is not flashy. It's disciplined. You judge the day by decisions, not decibels, right? You let wind, structure, and sign do the talking. When you commit to that mindset, quiet mornings stop feeling empty and start feeling like a solvable puzzle, and puzzles are completable. You can complete that mission. Once you reset your mindset, the next step is to figure out why the mountains went quiet to begin with. Silence isn't random, right? It's almost always caused by a handful of predictable factors. If you can diagnose the exact reason, you can adjust your tactics instead of hunting blind. Pressure is the first culprit, right? On heavily hunted western public land, bulls learn fast that loud bugling brings hunters. After opening weekend or in units with lots of roads and trailheads, elk shut down their vocal play. They still talk, just not out loud where everyone can hear. Their language shifts to softer mews, low chuckles or grunts, and body language inside the herd. If you know you're in a pressured unit, expect that silence is a defense mechanism, not a sign that they're gone. That means your strategy has to shift towards intercepts, fresh sign, and quiet setups rather than chasing sound. Weather is another major silencer, right? Hot spells push elk deeper into cover, north-facing slopes and dark timber. On those days, bugling often happens under the cover of night when it's cool. The same goes for high winds. Elk don't like calling when they can't hear each other or pinpoint threats. Rain can work both ways. A soft drizzle sometimes makes elk feel secure and it's great for hunting in, while hard rain keeps them bedded and quiet. The key is reading conditions and adjusting expectations. Don't expect a windy morning on a south slope to sound like a September highlight reel, right? Then there's the calendar effect, the natural rhythm of the rut. Early September often brings scattered bugles from young bulls. Mid-September through the third week can be explosive, especially when multiple cows are cycling. But outside those windows, calling activity can taper sharply. Late September into October, bulls often conserve energy, stay tight with their cows, and only pipe up when a real threat or hot cow triggers it. If you're hunting that window, don't judge your success by the number of bugles. Judge it by your ability to locate fresh sign, set ambushes near bedding, feed, or water. Imagine this scenario. It's mid-September, but opening weekend just ended in your unit. The parking lot was jammed, and you know multiple groups pounded the same drainage. 2 days later, you hike back in and it's dead silent. Without a diagnosis, you might assume the elk are gone. With the right lens, you realize pressure shut them up. Instead of blowing locator bugles from every ridge, you drop into travel corridors. You hunt fresh tracks and poop and slip into a downwind bench between feed and bedding, the transition zone that we talk about a lot. Silence told you exactly what you needed. Play stealth, not sound. The lesson here is pretty simple. Silence is not an enemy, it's a clue. If you slow down long enough to ask why, you can see the pattern. Was it pressure, weather, or timing? Each answer leads to an adjustment that keeps you in the game. When elk aren't talking, you lose one of your biggest clues, right? That means your number one ally becomes invisible. The wind. If you want to stay in the game on quiet days, scent control isn't optional. It's the entire playbook. I got busted late this morning because I just didn't pay close enough attention to what that wind was doing, and a thermal switch got me. Elk may ignore a faint call. They may not react to your footsteps, but they will never forgive bad wind. I watched a bull circle below me this morning, hit my wind, and right before he hit it, I was saying, oh no, I'm pretty sure that this shaded downhill slope right here is going to be blowing right at him. And as soon as he hit it, that was the end of the game. One whiff and the whole drainage erupts, leaving you with nothing but empty timber and boot miles. At first light, thermals almost always run downhill, right? Cold air from overnight sinks, pooling in bottoms and in the slides. This is the safest window to work your way up into country below suspected bedding or feeding elk. Hunters who forget this step often blow elk out before breakfast, then spend the rest of the day chasing ghosts. As the sun warms the slope, because that's the idea behind thermals, right? Thermal, heat, thermals begin to switch once the sun has warmed the slope, right? Depending on the terrain, that flip can be quick and dramatic or gradual and sloppy, especially when you get crosswinds at play. If you're not ready for it, you'll get caught with your scent drifting right into the elk. Use terrain to your advantage. On mornings when thermals are dropping, approach through creek bottoms, shaded north slopes, or side hills where air is draining away. Always try to picture where your scent cone is drifting, right? Not just in front of you, but down into cuts, side drainages, and benches. My son and I were just talking about this a little bit ago, where oftentimes you'll notice that the wind is doing one thing where you're at and doing something else where the animal is. So try to prepare for that as best you can, especially when you can judge the thermals, right? Is it shaded where the animal's going to come across? You might have downhill thermals, even if it's warm out, right? Is it sunny where he's at or where he's going to cross? Really good chance, probably, that the thermals are going to be rising there. And so depending on where you're at, you might be in the shade, thermals might be pulling down, where he's coming across might be pulling up, right? So just be aware of those things and where cross winds can shift and get you. A bull doesn't have to see you. He just has to catch your wind funneled down a finger ridge and he's gone. As the day heats, thermals will pull upward pretty consistently all day long until the evening shade starts to happen. This is when elk shift into bedding cover, often on north-facing timber. The smart play is to reposition ahead of that switch. If you're hunting a basin, you might move to a mid-slope vantage point that lets you glass bedding edges once air starts rising. If you're inside the timber, side hill your way across so you're always just below the thermal line, letting your scent drift harmlessly into open air. Wind direction isn't just vertical, right? It's not just the up and down of the thermals. Crosswinds and canyon drafts, they complicate everything. Picture a steep drainage, right? Thermals might be climbing midday, but a side breeze pushes your scent sideways, wrapping it into finger draws, right, where elk are staging. You need to anticipate that. Drop lower or climb higher to cut the draft, depending on the scenario. Never assume the wind is doing one thing across the entire mountain, right? It rarely is. Check it constantly with powder or milkweed, every 50 yards at least. Confirm before you move. If in doubt, check it, right? Here's an example scenario for you. You're easing through a timber bench at mid-morning. Thermals are still dropping, but you know they'll flip soon. Instead of charging toward where you think elk are bedded, you slow down. You set up at the downwind edge of a transition area, listening, glassing. Within 15 minutes, the breeze on your face shifts upward. Thermals are flipping. Because you expected it, you side hill into a new position that keeps you above the bedding cover, right? Because those thermals are rising, and so you want to be above so your scent gets carried away. A few minutes later, you spot cows filtering into the shade below you. Had you ignored the wind, they'd have caught your scent and blown out. Quiet elk hunts are decided by who respects the wind and thermals more. Hunters who treat wind as an afterthought lose silently. They never even know why the basin went empty. Hunters who treat wind and thermals as the primary language of the mountain can shadow herds all day without a single bugle. When sound fails, scent rules everything. When bugles are gone, the map under your boots becomes your primary intel. Every track, every piece of poop, every rub, every travel funnel is a breadcrumb pointing you to the herd. Quiet hunts reward hunters who read the ground and the terrain as carefully as others listen for bugles. Try to start with fresh sign. Elk are heavy animals and they leave evidence wherever they move, right? Crisp-edged tracks that still hold moisture, or shiny poop with a strong color, and clipped grasses with wet ends all tell you you're close. Compare this with older, sun-dried poop or weathered tracks. Those can fool you into thinking an area is hot when the elk maybe have been gone for days, right? The key is stacking multiple indicators, not just one a lot of times. One track means nothing. A cluster of fresh sign within 100 yards means you're in the neighborhood. Next, try to understand travel structure. Elk rarely meander without purpose. I mean, they move around a lot, right, nomadically, but they move on terrain features that make sense. Finger ridges that lead from feed to bed. Benches where herds pause before changing elevation. Saddles that connect basins and creek bottoms that provide cover and water. If you learn to see these features as elk highways, you can predict movement even when no sound is there to confirm it. Picture a basin with a wide meadow feeding into dark timber. Cows feed out at night, then return to bed at first light. When bugles are absent, you can still catch them by positioning along the downwind edge of the finger ridge they use as a return path. Look for dirt trails worn to bare soil or parallel lines of poop that mark repeated use. Even without sound, those trails tell you where the herd is likely traveling. Fresh rubs add another layer, right? A rub with sticky sap or hair is not just a sign of rut, it's a timestamp. Bulls don't work trees randomly. They do it in travel corridors or in their bedroom, in their staging zone. You know, if you find a line of bedding cover that is covered with rubs, with bark shavings still damp, you've located a path that bulls are using silently. Positioning on those rub lines can put you in bow range without a single bugle exchanged. And don't underestimate the quiet sounds. Even when bulls won't bugle, elk still make noise. They're so social. They're very communicative. The snap of a stick, a single rock roll, a low grunt, a soft mew all tip you off. But you only catch those clues if you move slow enough, right? Silent days require a still hunting approach and a still hunter's type of patience, right? 10 steps is probably too many, right? A lot of times when we're still hunting and we're serious about it and we think we're close to a bedroom, it might be 3 steps max, right? 3 steps. Listen, glass. Try to pick up on something that your eyes wouldn't just see if you were looking at the whole scene. Repeat. Your eyes and your ears are tuned in to micro sign, not the loud soundtrack of bugles. And finally, try to connect and combine sign with timing. Fresh tracks heading uphill at first light mean elk are feeding back to bedding. Midday poop in shaded benches suggest they bedded close by. Evening trails pointing into open meadows tell you where they'll likely feed tonight. Tie those clues to the clock and you're essentially eavesdropping on their schedule without ever hearing them speak. Quiet elk are still patterned elk. If you discipline yourself to read fresh sign and travel structure, you stop guessing. Every hoof print and rub becomes information. Put enough of those pieces together and the puzzle leads you straight into elk, even on the most silent mornings. Most hunters write off the middle of the day. They hike back to camp, take a nap, or wander aimlessly because the woods are quiet and the elk are bedded. And sometimes that can be a mistake. It's important for you to recharge, but midday isn't necessarily dead time if it's quiet and you're not getting any type of calling action. It can be an overlooked window where subtle adjustments can put you in front of elk that everyone else walked past or missed because they weren't there. Elk don't simply vanish from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. They bed, they shift within bedding areas, and they often get up for short, quiet movements, sometimes to get a drink. Cows may rise to feed briefly in shaded benches. Bulls may check cows without bugling. Herds often adjust positions when the sun swings or thermals shift. If you're in position and disciplined, you can often catch these small moves. The key here is patience. Instead of covering miles, focus on micro moves. This means sliding into position on the downwind edge of bedding cover, not storming through it. Think of it as setting up an ambush where elk might make a small adjustment, not forcing action with calls or stalking. If you're tucked into shade near a rub line or the edge of a north-facing slope bench, you may only need a 30-yard shift to intersect elk getting up to stretch. Timing matters. Right after the thermals settle into a steady uphill flow, elk often shift beds. They prefer spots where air is cooler and scent security is stronger. If you can anticipate that adjustment, you can be waiting as they make their quiet shuffle to a different bedding area. Another midday trigger is water. On really hot days, cows especially may sneak out for a quick drink from hidden springs or seeps. If you've scouted or glassed those spots, setting up nearby or to intercept them on their way there during the lull can pay off when nobody else is hunting. Your approach during midday must be stealthier than ever though. Elk are bedded, they're alert and silent. Every step needs to be checked for noise. A lot of times you've got a lot of eyeballs, noses, and ears, right? Move like you're stalking within bow range, even if you're still hundreds of yards away. Use shadows, side hills, and terrain folds to mask your outline. The payoff is that one or two perfectly timed moves can create shot opportunities while other hunters are back at camp waiting for the evening time. Here's a scenario to consider. It's noon, hot, and silent. Most hunters bailed out hours ago, but you stayed, eased along a shaded contour and set up, near a hidden seep. 15 minutes later, you hear faint hoof taps and spot a cow slipping down to water. Behind her, a satellite bull drifts in silently. There were no bugles, there was no show, just an opportunity that you got because of patience. Midday hunting is about respecting the small windows. If you accept that elk still move, feed, and check each other in silence, you can catch them off guard when they least expect it, right? When they least expect hunters to be around. That's the beauty of that time of day. Quiet days reward the ones who grind through the middle. When the woods go silent, blasting bugles is usually the worst option you can pick. What do you think that those elk are thinking if you are the only bugle on the mountain, right? Bulls that are tight-lipped often want to stay that way, and it doesn't make sense to them when they hear other bugles, right? That the rest of the mountain isn't doing, that a normal elk wouldn't be doing, right? It's amazing. It's hard to understand how they communicate that shift, and they can all do it across an area at the same time, but they do, right? And a loud challenge call only confirms that a hunter's in the drainage. But that doesn't mean you have to hang your calls on the pack, right? The key is shifting from broadcast to whisper. Contact notes are sometimes your best friend here. A single soft mew delivered like you're just another cow keeping tabs on the herd is often all it takes. This isn't about pulling a bull across the canyon. It's about creating a subtle sound that nearby elk recognize as natural. If they're close, that little note can make them pause, perk up, and sometimes curious bulls will slip into view, right? The biggest mistake a lot of hunters make in these quiet conditions is overcalling. Think about how elk behave when they're pressured or not in peak rut. They aren't carrying on a long dialogue, right? They're communicating in short snippets, low chuckles, calf-like mews, or soft cow notes. If you mirror that rhythm, you blend in. If you hammer a bugle tube every 10 minutes, you stand out and it doesn't seem natural. Timing matters more than volume. Instead of calling on a rigid schedule, tie your sounds to events. For example, if you find fresh sign and you know you're shadowing elk, a couple of short mews can act as a ping. If you hear a faint stick pop ahead, add a soft note to simulate a cow that just stood up, or rake on a tree. If thermals are steady and you're set in an ambush spot, drop a light sequence of a few cow calls, right, to sound like a group. Each of these small plays works best when you're already in the right spot though, not when you're just miles away hoping to strike a response. Consider this scenario here. It's late morning, thermals just switched uphill, and you've set up along the shaded edge of a bench. You've confirmed fresh poop and clipped grass within the last 50 yards. Instead of bugling, you give a couple of soft cow mews, then wait. 10 minutes later, you hear faint hoof taps in the timber. A cow edges out, curious about that lone call. Behind her, a satellite bull slips through the shadows, silent as stone. That small effort of calling, right? Those small cow calls, those subtle notes, gave him a reason to check along with her. Maybe she was even just getting up to get a drink or feed and felt comfortable because there were natural sounds around and it pulled him with it. And so you never want to risk blowing the whole drainage out when you can use softer options. Another effective option on quiet days is social talk sequences. Think of it as background noise, right? 2 or 3 mews spaced over a couple of minutes, right? Maybe followed by a soft chuckle or two, maybe a little bit of light raking. It simulates a small group hanging out. Keep it light, irregular, and sparse. If a bull is nearby, he doesn't need convincing. He just needs a reason to check it out and be curious. The discipline here is restraint. You call less, but your calling sometimes means more. On silent days, one well-played contact note can create opportunity, while overcalling slams the door. Elk aren't gone, they're just talking underneath their breath, so you want to try to match that tone and you'll stay in the conversation. When bugles vanish, ambush also becomes one of the deadliest tools you have. Elk are still moving. They just aren't advertising it. If you can predict where that movement funnels, you can set up and let the herd walk into you without ever touching a call. Start with the funnels. These are natural choke points in elk country. Narrow saddles between basins, tight creek bottoms where ridges pinch together, or the gap between a burn and dark timber slope. Elk are big animals and they prefer the path of least resistance. Funnels focus that movement, right? If you set up downwind of these corridors, you don't need sound, you only need patience. Benches are another ambush goldmine. Picture a north-facing slope with a flat edge halfway up. Cows love these benches for midday bedding and staging. Bulls often check them quietly, circling to scent check before committing. A hunter tucked into the shade on the downwind edge of a bench can intercept elk slipping in or out without ever hearing a bugle. Then there are the edges that we've talked about before. Elk thrive in transition zones, the line where timber meets meadow, or burn meets living forest, or aspens fade into dark conifers. Edges provide feed, cover, and escape routes all in one. On silent days, elk often stage just inside the shadow line before stepping out. Set up with your back to cover, wind in your face, and your eyes locked on that transition. One quiet cow slipping into the open can lead a whole string of animals. Here's a scenario to think about. Evening is coming and the basin has been dead quiet all day. Instead of blowing locator bugles, you slide into position on a narrow saddle between true drainages, right? You tuck into cover, check the wind, and settle in. 30 minutes before dark, you hear faint hoof taps, right? A small herd filters through the saddle. Cows in front, a satellite bull trailing in the back. You never called, you never moved. You simply let the terrain do the work for you. Ambush hunting on quiet days requires discipline though. It's like tree stand hunting. It's boring, right? You have to commit to the spot, trust the terrain and the sign, and fight the urge to bounce from ridge to ridge. But the payoff can be huge. While other hunters are still searching for sound, you're in the funnel, on the bench, or at the edge, exactly where elk naturally travel. Silent hunts are mentally punishing. Without bugles, doubt creeps in and a lot of hunters burn themselves out chasing country instead of sticking to a system. The key to winning on these days is persistence built on a plan, which is built on sign or terrain. Start with route planning. Instead of wandering, map out a logical loop that covers travel corridors, benches, and edges with the wind in mind and in your favor. Think of it as a silent day circuit. You're not trying to blanket 10 miles. You're trying to make 3 or 4 deliberate passes through high probability zones. Each stop gives you intel, fresh sign, wind behavior, or even just elk presence. Even if you never see an animal, that loop also keeps you from second guessing and zigzagging aimlessly. Next is your energy management. Quiet hunts drain morale fast, and hunters often overexert early in the day trying to force action. Try to conserve your gas, right? Move slow, break often, and prioritize position over miles. Silent elk reward patience. A well-timed sit in a funnel beats a 10-mile death march every time, right? Carry enough food and hydration to keep yourself sharp during these times all day long so you don't default heading back into camp early. Finally, think in terms of the next day adjustments. Every silent hunt gives you clues, even if you never see elk. Maybe you found fresh rubs, bumped unseen animals, or glassed a trail at last light. Log those details. Build tomorrow's route around them. Persistence isn't just grinding, it's learning and adapting. Elk patterns shift daily, and staying keyed into those micro adjustments keeps you in the game longer than hunters who reset from scratch every morning. Picture this. You ran your loop, stayed disciplined, and never heard a bugle. At last light, you glass a cow slipping through a north slope bench, just a single cow. That single sighting shapes tomorrow's plan. Instead of guessing, you adjust your entry to hit that bench on the morning thermal drop. Persistence isn't glamorous, but it compounds. Each day builds intel that pushes you closer to success, even in silence. Silent hunts don't belong to the lucky, they belong to the relentless. When the mountains go quiet, most hunters lose faith. They rely on sound to do the work for them, and without it, they fold. But elk aren't gone. They're just living tighter, quieter patterns. If you reset your mindset, diagnose the reason for the silence, play the wind with discipline, read fresh sign and terrain, trust your midday windows, call more subtly, ambush smart, and build persistent systems, you'll stay lethal while others give up. Silence isn't defeat, it's an invitation to hunt sharper. If you want to take all of this to the next level, I'd like to invite you to join me on Team Backbone. That's where the real work happens. Direct access to me, a private community of driven hunters, exclusive digital tools, monthly giveaways, and member-only gear. Team Backbone is our inner circle for guys who refuse to quit when the mountains go quiet. You can learn more at backboneunlimited.com underneath the membership tab. Thanks for being here. Until next time, train harder, hunt smarter, and never settle.